Are students learning the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the college and career-ready standards? How at any one point in time do we know this is occurring? Through analyzing our processes, our assessments, and our outcomes, we will leave this course having a clear picture of what it means to prepare our Montana students for collegiate and workforce success, as well as what processes we can employ to help us make sure all students leave high school prepared for post-secondary success in college or a career. The goals of this lesson are to understand the connections between assessment literacy and other current educational work, including student learning objectives, student growth measures, and formative instructional practices. Define assessment literacy and understand why it is important to be able to select, develop, and review assessments. Develop a trained eye to critically review existing assessments and design new assessments with regard to the foundations of assessment literacy and quality assessment design. Before jumping into the nuts and bolts of assessment literacy, consider this. Research shows that teachers spend from a quarter to a third of their professional time on assessment-related activities. Almost all do so without the benefit of having learned the principles of sound assessment. That's a lot of time without a lot of value added or foundation into the reasons why assessment matters and should be taking place in our classrooms. Now with our goals and reasons in sight, briefly let's focus on the theory of action offered by the Smarter Balance assessment. This graphic helps demonstrate the overarching goal of Smarter Balance, that is, to ensure that all students leave high school prepared for post-secondary success in college or a career through increased student learning and improved teaching. As many of you know, the Smarter Balance is aligned to the Common Core standards that clearly specify college, career, and grade level expectations. These assessments are grounded in a thoughtful, standards-based curriculum and are managed as part of the integrated systems of standards, curriculum, assessment, instruction, and teacher development. These assessments produce evidence of student performance on challenging tasks that evaluate the Common Core standards. Instruction and assessment seek to teach and evaluate knowledge and skills that generalize and can transfer to higher education in multiple work domains. The assessments are structured to continuously improve teaching and learning. Assessment as, of, and for learning is designed to develop understanding of what learning standards are, what high-quality work looks like, what growth is occurring, and what is needed for student learning. This means that teachers are integrally involved in the development and overall assessment process, such as using multiple measures to give timely and meaningful information about specific areas of performance so that teachers can follow up with targeted instruction, that students can better target their own efforts, and that all, that is, students, teachers, administrators, policymakers, can more fully understand what students know and can do in order to guide our curriculum and professional development decisions. Here we will lightly touch on each of these theory of action statements. The Data Quality Campaign shares that to date, much of the conversation about data use has been primarily focused on student assessment scores. Make no mistake, data about student performance on assessments, from teacher-made quizzes to state standardized tests, are necessary for informing teacher practice. A critical skill for teachers is assessment literacy, including the ability to design and make use of assessments as appropriate. Assessment literacy and assessment data, though, are not the entire picture of data literacy. Currently, teachers have information well beyond test scores available to them to help inform their practice. Therefore, they need to understand how to use a varied set of student data to inform instruction and to improve student outcomes. This infographic explores the multiple ways teachers access and act on data throughout a school year. Here, Ms. Bolin demonstrates the definition of teacher data literacy. She uses multiple types of data throughout the year to improve student outcomes. The practices depicted here, including data use beyond assessment data, include using data beyond assessment data such as attendance, behavior, outcomes, course grades and patterns, interventions, growth, teacher observations, and more. These are a part of teaching and learning every day. What is missing is the training and support for all teachers to use all types of data to improve student achievement. This course will provide teachers with a better understanding of what assessment literacy is, why it is important, and how one can use assessment-driven instruction, or this backwards design, to promote student learning in his or her own classroom. So what do we mean by assessment-driven instruction? This is a definition of data-driven instruction, along with a list of the kinds of data that are frequently used to guide instruction. The information highlighted in red is usually obtained through tests, and the information highlighted in green comes from teacher observations. Classroom and school level data can help us identify areas of instruction that need strengthening. Some reasons assessment is important and valuable to educators is that it improves student learning, identifies instructional, course, or assignment challenges, and improves instruction by identifying what instructional adjustments might be needed. The Educational Testing Services Linking Classroom Assessment and Student Learning points out that linking assessment and instruction is critical to effective learning. Classroom assessment is among an educator's most essential educational tools. When properly developed and interpreted, assessments can help teachers better understand what their students are learning. By providing the means to gather evidence about what students can know and do, classroom assessment can help teachers identify student strengths and weaknesses, monitor student learning and progress, and plan and conduct instruction. Classroom assessments do more than just measure learning. What we assess, and how we communicate the results send a clear message to students about what is worth learning, how it should be learned, and how well we expect them to perform. With ongoing informal and formal classroom assessment, we allow educators to monitor teaching effectiveness and student learning, motivate and shape learning and instruction, help teachers gauge student mastery of required skills, help teachers determine whether students are prepared for tests that are used for high-stakes decisions, and help students improve their own performances. Therefore, good evidence improves instruction. If we keep learning goals in mind, consider our assessment strategies, and determine what would constitute evidence of students reaching their learning goals, we become more assessment literate, and we are able to make accurate and appropriate decisions about what assessments we should use. We can divide the purposes of assessment into two categories: assessment of learning and assessment for learning. Summative assessment, or assessment of learning, measures the level of achievement at a point in time. Standardized tests and common assessments fall into this category. Any work that is evaluated that counts towards the report card grade we can consider an assessment of learning. Popham's 2008 definition of formative assessment is that it is a planned process in which assessment-based evidence is used by teachers to adjust their ongoing instructional procedures or by students to adjust their current learning tactics. Formative assessment, or assessment for learning, on the other hand, is not an accountability tool, but a teaching tool. We can conduct assessments to make decisions about instructions before the learning process or during the learning process. For example, we conduct pre-tests to help us decide where to begin with certain groups of students, and we can give students quizzes to help them decide what their strengths are and what they need to focus on. Formative assessment describes the formal and informal processes used by teachers and students during instruction to gather information about learning, to determine the instructional needs of the student, and to help revise what needs to come next in learning, and to directly improve that learning. It is also possible that summative assessment may have formative uses. For example, the use of summative evidence to inform what comes next for individuals or groups of students with named release items is possible. We will further tease through this idea throughout the course. It is important that instruction include balanced assessment. Here's a graphic illustrating the formative and summative pieces discussed earlier. You can see all categories here, and remember, formative refers to the manner in which assessment is used, not to any particular assessment itself. Formative assessments serve to support learning, not merely to verify it. In order to know whether or not assessment or item is appropriately measuring the content and skills you intend to measure, it is helpful to know how items and assessments are written. As we saw in the course introduction, here is a schematic showing how Smarter Balance used the Common Core to develop its assessments. These Common Core standards provided the content for the Smarter Balance assessments, content specifications, and item specifications documents. Here is a high-level overview of item development. There are 4 aspects shown in this graphic: evidence-based design, content specifications, test specifications, and item specifications. First, evidence-based design. This piece has 2 components. The first component is identify what students should know and be able to do to demonstrate readiness for college and career. The second is to identify the kinds of evidence that would be sufficient to support the claims. In other words, what claims are made about the cognitive abilities of students and what evidence of student learning supports these claims. Second, the content specifications. These are used to define the assessment targets based on the learning expectations of the Common Core standards. The third, test specifications. These are written to ensure balance and accessibility of the item types, the distribution of types, the distribution of items, the cognitive rigor, or in short, the overall balance of the assessment. And the fourth, the item specifications. These provide item writers with guidance in creating items that meet the expectations of the Common Core, through creating a bridge between the content specifications and the actual assessment. Further, these provide specific claims and targets to help ensure that the tests are measuring the intended constructs. Content specifications are an important tool that will inform the development of all items and tasks. Content specifications provide detailed information about the content that will be measured by the assessment system. The content specifications provide important information about the claims educators will make in assessing the achievement of the standards. They also define the specific knowledge, skills, and abilities that will be the target of the assessment, and the type of evidence that will be collected through student responses. Finally, content specifications provide the foundation for the item specifications, which educators will depend on to guide the development and the review of items and tasks. Just as in the Smarter Balance assessment, NAEP has a framework guiding the content that will be assessed, as well as its own item specifications document to provide boundaries for what is accessible. For example, look at NAEP's Appendix G of the Science Assessment and Item Specifications of 2009 here on the right-hand section of your screen. This provides an example of the content expectations for life science and how these performance expectations might help writers generate items. Examples which differ in levels of completeness are grouped by the subtopic, and within each subtopic are sequenced by the content statement code. Performance expectations, given within each example, are illustrative but not exhaustive. Item specifications build on content specifications and provide detailed information about the items and tasks that will be developed to measure each assessment target. As shown in the left-hand image, there are several parts of this item specification table. All of the information contained in the table is designed to help an item or task developer understand what evidence is to be collected about which assessment target and through which types of items or tasks. The first few sections of the item specification table restate the information contained in the content specifications document. Shown here are the claim and assessment targets, as well as the standards to be assessed by the item. The next section describes the evidence that is required in order to support the claim about one or more assessment targets. Next, task models describe the characteristics of items and tasks that may be used to collect evidence. Also shown here is information about the potential accessibility or concerns that a task model may raise. For example, a task model that asks students to use a line drawing tool to create a precise line of symmetry may create an accessibility challenge for some students who have difficulty manipulating the mouse. It is important to consider these concerns and to try and minimize them to the extent possible when developing actual items. In some cases, however, an accessibility concern cannot be eliminated, and the item must be marked as inaccessible for a student with a specific access need. Like the Smarter Balanced item specification table, NAEP has information restated from its content specifications, as well as statements or the claim and assessment targets that are to be assessed by the item. These are referred to as performance expectations and are shown below in the item example and content versus practice graphic on your right-hand side of your screen. For science, NAEP items are not content-free, and they require students to also engage in the practices. Students participate in 4 cognitive demands within a NAEP assessment. For instance, identify science principles, that is, knowing that. For knowing that, students should be able to reason with basic fact. For using scientific inquiry, that is, knowing how, students should be able to apply scientific facts and perform routine procedures such as measure, observe, and interpret. Using science principles, that is, knowing why, students should be able to explain and predict natural phenomena. For technological design, that is, knowing when and where to apply knowledge, students should be able to transfer current knowledge to new situations and know when and where to use science. So briefly pause and think about what kinds of assessments you typically use in your classroom. Here are some common task types that NAEP uses. The use of discrete items, that is, selected response such as multiple choice, constructed response items, short or extended, or concept mapping tasks. Also, hands-on tasks, performance-based assessment, and predict, observe, explain items, and interactive computer-based tasks. This is not an all-inclusive list, but showcases some of the assessment types that are commonly used in large-scale assessments. As a former high school science teacher, I'm going to use a scientific process analogy to emphasize the need for assessment literacy in classroom instruction. Science, as with student learning, is a nonlinear process. This interactive and dynamic infographic will help illustrate the many facets, not just of science, but of assessment pedagogy. This graphic is meant to illustrate the scientific process. However, it can be used for assessment literacy as well, as it provides clear ways in which we engage in the process. However, a little scaffolding is needed to make it relatable to teachers. So teachers, like scientists, work through these processes to graduate students who are prepared for post-secondary success in college or a career. So let's explore what this looks like. Under the exploration and discovery, teachers make observations of student learning through formative assessment techniques. They ask students questions, they engage students in rich, authentic, problem-based activities. They share assessment techniques with other teachers. This piece of the puzzle shows how teachers daily obtain information about their students' learning to inform their instruction. Under the testing ideas, teachers gather student outcome data to support or refute ideas about student learning and whether students are learning what is intended to be learned. It is imperative that teachers appropriately interpret these data and that they not only understand what learning has not occurred, but also what may be preventing the student from learning what is expected. Under the benefits and outcome area, teachers build knowledge about their practice through gathering evidence and interpreting their student performance as it relates to their instruction. It is through this process that educators can solve achievement gaps, provide interventions, and inform their instructional approaches to better prepare students for the challenges they face after graduation and beyond. Lastly, under the community analysis and feedback section, it is important for teachers to seek classroom feedback, peer feedback, as these processes help challenge or understand the beliefs they have about student learning in their classroom. Consistent and constant feedback about what is going well, not going well, and what aids might support student learning is crucial not only to teacher practice, but also to student success. Therefore, teaching like science is an iterative process. Student learning is not predetermined. There are many routes into the process. Sharing knowledge and seeking professional feedback helps ensure student success, and the process of assessing is intertwined with instruction. Let's see how the motifs are reflected in the Ohio Department of Education's standards for the teaching profession. The research is clear. What matters most is the quality of the teacher who we put before every student. It is the interaction between teacher and student that is critical to producing high-level student learning and achievement. The focus of teaching and learning. Students. Teachers understand student learning and development and respect the diversity of the students they teach. Content. Teachers know and understand the content area for which they have instructional responsibility. Assessment. Teachers understand and use varied assessments to inform instruction, evaluate, and ensure student learning. They are knowledgeable about assessment types, purposes, and the data they generate. They can select, develop, and use a variety of assessments. They analyze data to monitor student progress and to plan, differentiate, and modify instruction. They collaborate and communicate with students, parents, and colleagues. They involve learners in self-assessment and goal setting. Assessment literacy enables educators to effectively review, select, and develop valid, reliable measures. In instruction, teachers plan and deliver effective instruction that enhances the learning of each individual student. The learning environment. Teachers create learning environments that promote high levels of learning and achievement for all students. Collaboration and communication. Teachers collaborate and communicate with other educators and administrators, students and parents, and the community to support student learning. And professional responsibility and growth. Teachers assume responsibility for professional growth, performance, and involvement as an individual and as a member of the learning community. Our policy drives our instructional goals. Each goal provides us with our learning objectives. Each learning objective gives us a way to measure student outcomes from our assessments, whether they're formative, summatives, etc. Assessments give us the data or results that allow us to make actionable decisions about our instruction. In other words, what are you trying to find out about your students' learning? What learning goals or outcomes do you want to measure? What kind of assessment will give you that evidence? As you make an accurate and appropriate assessment, it is most important that this assessment provides evidence of what you intend it to provide. The assessment must measure the knowledge, skills, or abilities that we believe is important. If the goal is to test for the retention of facts, then a factual test may be your best choice. Measuring student conceptual understanding or the ability to perform tasks usually requires more complex forms of assessment, such as performance-based assessment. So for the mission of assessment, what is it that we're trying to do? How are we going to do it? How do we know we are succeeding? So with our goals, where is it that we want to go? What is it that students should achieve or learn? Looking at the outcomes, what did they achieve or learn? Using our assessments, are some things not going well? Can we improve our instruction to support student learning? And lastly, is our instruction aligned with where we want to go? This graphic illustrates the assessment learning cycle. Objectives define expectations. Assessment measures learning goals. Outcome data is analyzed, and results are interpreted for meaning. These student learning outcomes should be directly correlated to student learning objectives from our instructional goals. So how is it that we do that? Assessment literacy enables educators to effectively review, select, and develop valid, reliable measures. Assessment integrated with instruction is an extremely powerful teaching tool. Using assessment as part of the learning process instead of a summative role at the end of teaching ensures that students understand the relevance of what they're learning, how that learning will be assessed, and research shows that helping students understand what is expected of them and why gives students an opportunity to become active participants in their own education. How does assessment drive instruction? We are giving you items so you can intimately see how these items can measure standards, rigor, and overall goals of your curriculum. By these processes, you already know how the item is aligned and your goals and objectives for using that assessment. Using the student assessment-driven inquiry, teachers can make meaningful use of assessments and inform their instruction to support student learning. So how does PAO instruction lead to students learning what we intend them to learn? We consider this professional learning as a way for instructors to more deeply and critically look at assessments as tools to measure their learning objectives. No matter the assessment, whether summative, formative, through backwards design, or assessment-driven instruction, teachers can learn how assessments measure not only our intended expectations, but whether students have learned what we intended for them to learn. This approach provides a rich and experiential way to examine what we assess, why we assess it, how it is assessed, and where and when it is assessed. By the end of this course, you will engage in item classification and work through activities that help you confirm the quality of assessment items and standards, attend to the cognitive rigor or complexity of items, ensure that the depth and the breadth of the items meets the specificity of the standards, use multiple measures to inform your practice, identify measures that support the major instructional shifts of the college and career-ready standards. The basic steps for using assessment to improve your teaching strategies allow you to look for patterns and trends about what students know and don't know, which allows you to look at what standards appear most challenging, helps you make observations about those patterns or trends, and whether or not some standards require special skills or tools. It allows you to prioritize your observations and determine what needs to be dealt with right away. So how will you know student learning is improving? Determine indicators of success. Assessments are ways in which teachers gather evidence about student learning. By systematically gathering, analyzing, and interpreting evidence to determine how well student learning matches our expectations, we become self-improving practitioners, ensuring all students leave high school prepared for post-secondary success in college or a career through increased student learning and improved teaching. To reiterate, this is more than all about assessments. It is the process of being reflective and conscientious about how assessment and instruction are inseparable. It's being purposeful about why do you assess, how do you assess, and when do you assess. Being assessment literate allows you to design and make use of assessments as appropriate, inform your instruction, and improve student outcomes. Thus, a comprehensive understanding of your integral role and involvement in assessment will allow you to have meaningful, targeted instruction, helping you to graduate students who are prepared for post-secondary success